The film ends on this solemn and reflective note, emphasizing that while the body can be imprisoned, the spirit remains unconquerable. Starring Scott Adkins as Wing Commander James Wright and Peter Shinkoda as Lieutenant Colonel Benjiro Ito, Prisoner of War, is a testament to the human will. Directed by Michael Copon, who also stars as Sergeant Gabriel Villanueva, the narrative explores the darkest depths of human cruelty and the brightest sparks of courage. The names of the cast, including Gabby Garcia as Teresa and Gary Cairns as Jonesy, appear over the final shots of the liberated camp. James's story is a reminder that dignity is not something given by a rank, but something found in the mud of a prison. As the screen fades to black, the sound of the ocean remains, a symbol of the vast, uncaring world that they managed to survive. He is no longer a prisoner of war, but he will always be a guardian of the memory of those who stayed behind. The war has ended, and the long journey toward true peace has finally begun for the survivors of the camp. The final scene of the film shows James back home, sitting on a quiet porch and watching the sun rise over a peaceful horizon. His physical wounds have begun to heal, but the memories of the camp and the men he lost linger deeply in his eyes. He thinks of Jonesy and the others who never returned from the railway, their sacrifices fueling his quiet, daily life. Gabriel writes their names in a journal, ensuring that the history of the camp is never forgotten by those who live in peace. The freedom they fought for carries an immense, unspoken cost that they will bear for the rest of their lives. Survival has become an act of defiance, a way to honor the dead by living well in the world they helped to save. James takes Teresa's hand gently as they walk through a field, the silence between them filled with a mutual understanding of what they endured. The war is officially over, but the shadows of the jungle still dance in the corners of his mind when the lights go out. The sun rises on a changed world, one that is colder and harder, but fundamentally free from the grip of the camp. Exhausted and nearly broken, the survivors eventually wash up near an abandoned coastal village that feels like a ghost town. Teresa, having managed to escape the camp separately during the chaos, miraculously reunites with them in the ruins. They learn from a hidden radio that the war is finally nearing its end and that the Empire is in retreat across the Pacific. Allied forces are advancing rapidly into the region, their ships appearing on the horizon like the heralds of a new world. James collapses from total physical exhaustion on the sand, his body finally allowing itself to shut down after months of survival. Gabriel supports him with the strength of a brother, refusing to leave his side until the rescue teams arrive. British soldiers eventually find them in the village, providing the medical care and food they had long since forgotten. The camp is liberated shortly after, with the world finally seeing the horrors that had been hidden behind its fences. Ito is arrested and held for war crimes, his reign of terror ending in a cold cell not unlike the ones he once guarded. Collins and James engage in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, their bodies slick with rain and mud as they grapple for control. The ground is treacherous, causing them to slip and fall as they trade blows that carry the weight of months of accumulated rage. Gabriel battles another soldier nearby, using his last bit of strength to keep the enemy from interfering with James. Hiroshi intervenes once more, this time more directly, by refusing to fire on the escaping men when ordered by his superior. Collins is ultimately defeated by James, pinned to the ground with a knife at his throat in a moment of pure, raw tension. James looks into the eyes of his tormentor and, in a final act of self-definition, refuses to execute the man. His morality remains his final armor, separating him from the monsters he has been fighting since his plane went down. They dive into the swollen, fast-moving river just as the rest of the patrol reaches the bank and opens fire. The current carries them away from the shore, the cold water washing the blood and mud of the camp from their tired skin. Freedom remains uncertain as they drift into the unknown, but the chains of the prison have finally been broken. James fights through multiple guards with a brutal, instinctive intensity, his elite training resurfacing as he clears a path to the cells. He manages to free Gabriel despite his friend's severe injuries, carrying him out of the outpost under a hail of confused gunfire. Hiroshi intervenes discreetly during the escape, misdirecting a patrol to give the Americans a few precious minutes of a head start. It is a quiet rebellion of conscience that saves their lives, proving that even in war, humanity can survive in small ways. However, the war reveals its ultimate contradictions as James realizes that even his allies can be driven to similar levels of violence. Ito orders a total pursuit, throwing every available man into the forest to prevent the news of the camp from reaching the world. The river is finally within sight, its rushing waters promising a path to the sea and potential rescue by Allied ships. But Captain Collins intercepts them at the riverbank, his rifle leveled at James's chest with a cold, triumphant smile. A final, desperate confrontation erupts on the muddy shore as the jungle trembles with the fury of their struggle. Hiroshi, a young and idealistic Japanese soldier, finds himself hesitating when he finally corners the group during a night patrol. He sees James through the brush but chooses not to pull the trigger, his conscience suddenly at war with his duty. A silent, profound exchange of glances occurs between the two enemies, a moment that briefly fractures the hatred of the war. Hiroshi begins to question his orders and the morality of the camp he serves, feeling the weight of the atrocities committed. Meanwhile, Ito demands the capture of the prisoners at any cost, his own honor tied to the success of his brutal prison. Tension rises among the Japanese officers as the pursuit drags on, leading to internal conflicts and accusations of incompetence. Gabriel is eventually captured during a sudden and violent ambush, separated from James in the chaos of the jungle. James is forced to make a harrowing choice between continuing his escape or returning to rescue his friend from certain death. He chooses loyalty over life, turning back to infiltrate a Japanese outpost alone with nothing but a stolen knife. The conflict turns deeply personal as the lines between soldier and man become increasingly blurred in the heat of battle. In the dense, suffocating forest, the nature of their survival changes form from a struggle against men to a struggle against nature. They lack food, clean water, and medical supplies, making every mile traveled a grueling test of their dwindling physical strength. Jonesy eventually dies from his infected wound, his passing weighing heavily on the morale of the small, shivering group. Gabriel begins to voice his doubts about the plan, fearing that they are simply walking deeper into a green, leafy tomb. James refuses to surrender to despair, his military training keeping him focused on the objective of reaching the Allied lines. They spend their days evading Japanese patrols that move through the brush with frightening, silent efficiency. Captain Collins leads the pursuit, a man who knows the terrain better than the prisoners and who is eager for the kill. Lethal traps are set along the primary jungle paths, forcing the escapees to move through the thickest, most dangerous parts of the brush. The river becomes their only hope for a fast exit, but it remains miles away through a maze of vines and thorns. Each step tests their endurance to the limit, as the ghost of despair follows closely behind them in the shadows. The storm arrives with a violent fury, drowning out the sound of footsteps and the shouts of the guards with its thunder. Rain falls in sheets, obscuring the vision of the snipers in the towers and creating the perfect window for their desperate move. James moves with predatory efficiency, quietly neutralizing a guard near the perimeter to secure their exit path. Gabriel works frantically to cut through the thick barbed wire, his hands bleeding from the sharp metal as he pulls the fence apart. Suddenly, a powerful spotlight ignites from the central tower, sweeping across the mud and catching them in its blinding glare. Alarms erupt across the camp in a deafening chorus of bells and sirens, signaling that the escape has been compromised. Gunfire splits the night air, and Jonesy is shot in the shoulder, falling into the mud with a pained cry. James refuses to leave his comrade behind, hauling him up and pushing the group toward the breach in the fence. They manage to scramble through the wire just as the first wave of guards reach their position with bayonets fixed. The jungle swallows them whole, its darkness providing a temporary shield against the lead raining down from behind. The hunt begins immediately, as Ito unleashes his best trackers into the woods to bring back the fugitives dead or alive. When Wing Commander James Wright's fighter plane is violently shot down over the vast Pacific, his entire world changes in a matter of seconds. Wounded but remarkably alive, he is quickly captured by Japanese forces and stripped of his rank, his dignity, and his freedom. He is transported to a remote, high-security prisoner-of-war camp where the air is thick with the scent of decay and oppressive humidity. Lieutenant Colonel Benjiro Ito rules this isolated hellscape with cold, mathematical precision, viewing his captives as subhuman labor. Each grueling day is defined by forced labor under a punishing tropical sun and constant, calculated humiliation meant to break the spirit. British and American prisoners are starved and beaten until they are mere shadows of the men they were before the war. James struggles desperately to keep his inner dignity intact, refusing to show weakness in front of his captors even as his body fails. He eventually forms a deep bond with Sergeant Gabriel Villanueva, a man whose resilience becomes a vital source of strength. Teresa, a civilian nurse caught in the crossfire, secretly tends to the wounded and passes messages under the cover of night. Guards watch every minute movement with lethal suspicion, knowing that even a whisper can be the spark of a rebellion. Survival becomes a daily, exhausting battle, and personal dignity becomes the only fragile weapon the prisoners have left to wield. The early days in the camp reveal invisible and complex prisoner hierarchies that dictate life and death behind the barbed wire. Some men choose to collaborate with the guards for extra rations, trading their honor for a few more days of meager life. Others, like James, steadfastly refuse to bend to the will of their captors, enduring the worst of the camp's brutality. Captain Endo enforces a merciless brand of discipline, ensuring that no one forgets their status as expendable prisoners of war. Corporal Hirano takes a sadistic delight in breaking spirits, often targeting those who show the slightest hint of defiance. Beatings fall frequently for minor infractions, such as failing to bow low enough or moving too slowly during the roll call. James is forced into a labor gang to build a strategic railway line through the dense, unforgiving heart of the jungle. The tropical sun destroys bodies rapidly, causing many to collapse and die where they stand in the thick, red mud. Gabriel tries to lift morale with dark humor and stories of home, but the sheer exhaustion of the work corrodes hope. Nights echo with the quiet, stifled suffering of men who have forgotten what it feels like to be free and safe. The camp slowly transforms from a physical enclosure into a mental prison that threatens to erase their very identities. The atmosphere of the camp reaches a breaking point when a desperate prisoner attempts a futile escape into the jungle. He is captured before he can even reach the first line of trees, and Ito orders a public execution to serve as a warning. All prisoners are forced to stand at attention and witness the horrific violence, a move designed to crush any remaining sparks of resistance. James clenches his fists helplessly, his jaw set in a mask of suppressed rage as he watches his fellow countrymen fall. The violence is intended to inspire terror, but instead, something cold and unstoppable awakens deep within the commander's weary soul. A silent, iron determination takes root, one that is far stronger than the fear of death or the pain of the whip. Gabriel shares this same resolve, and they begin the dangerous process of whispering plans for a mass escape in the dark. Teresa warns them of the extreme danger, knowing that the guards are looking for any reason to commit further atrocities. But the idea has already taken root, blooming like a dark flower in the center of the camp's daily misery. They realize that to die trying to escape is a far better fate than to waste away in the mud of the railway. The atmosphere of the camp reaches a breaking point when a desperate prisoner attempts a futile escape into the jungle. He is captured before he can even reach the first line of trees, and Ito orders a public execution to serve as a warning. All prisoners are forced to stand at attention and witness the horrific violence, a move designed to crush any remaining sparks of resistance. James clenches his fists helplessly, his jaw set in a mask of suppressed rage as he watches his fellow countrymen fall. The violence is intended to inspire terror, but instead, something cold and unstoppable awakens deep within the commander's weary soul. A silent, iron determination takes root, one that is far stronger than the fear of death or the pain of the whip. Gabriel shares this same resolve, and they begin the dangerous process of whispering plans for a mass escape in the dark. Teresa warns them of the extreme danger, knowing that the guards are looking for any reason to commit further atrocities. But the idea has already taken root, blooming like a dark flower in the center of the camp's daily misery. They realize that to die trying to escape is a far better fate than to waste away in the mud of the railway.